everybody, Jeppy here, and today I'm sharing with you 20 disturbing and horrifying details in Valorant. Some of these are really unique that not many people know about, like the Experiment X11 and the dark history behind the range that I didn't even know about until researching for this video. So everyone, make sure to leave a like if you're excited, and definitely subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. It goes a long way for the algorithm and definitely helps out the channel. Starting off our top 20 list is where does Sage's life come from? So there has been a few hints already in Valorant that questions Sage if she even really knows where her powers and the life she gives, where that comes from. And so far, it looks like she doesn't have an answer. Fade brought it up briefly in one of her blackmailing dossiers, ending her question with, yes, ignorance is safer, while Omen says this famous voice line to Sage when on the same team.
Sage, the life you give. Do you ever wonder where it's taken from?
So this leaves us to the question with, where does Sage's life actually originate and come from? The theory tossed around lately is that whenever Sage revives someone in our world, a soul is taken from an alternate universe and used to fuel the resurrection that Sage does. It's really dark, and with the fact that there are multiple realities in Valorant's lore, it could be true. Our next fact is the darkness of the practice range. So as I'm sure most of you know, the practice range is floating in the air. It was also affected by the spike detonation at Venice, Italy that lifted up the map ascent as well. But what many people don't know is that the range isn't even attached to Venice. Off the coast of Venice is on a small island not far named Poveglia. Now this island has a dark history. Back when the plague resurfaced in Italy in 1776, the island was deemed a quarantine zone and infected patients were sent there to, well, pretty much die all the way up until 1814. Then in 1922, the buildings that were used to house the sick and dying over 100 years in the past were now converted to house mentally handicapped patients in a newly founded insane asylum. Just like pretty much every insane asylum at that time, pretty much every patient was subjected to barbaric torture in the name of science and mistreatment. Now this lasted until 1968 in Earth's real timeline, but the weird thing is that you can still see hospital beds scattered around the range in various locations. It gives us an eerie reminder of the terrible things the island was home to. You want to know what else is eerie? People that skip through YouTube ads. All right, at this point, either you skip through every sponsor on a video or you're just stubborn, because I'm talking about Valorant Tracker again, and if you haven't downloaded it yet, you are just being plain silly. Valorant Tracker is a 100% free software that links to your Valorant account, unlocking so much information you never had access to in the past. Every win rate, KD ratio, and more for all the agents you play, your headshot percentage, KD, and more for every weapon you use, your win rates showing you what your best map is, and you'd be surprised which map you play the best on. For me, it's Fracture. But one of the best things about Valorant Tracker is the in-match tool that lets you gain the information of pretty much how good the enemy team is and how good your teammates are too. If you got a sneaking suspicion that the enemy chamber is an op crush, well, you can just simply click on their name and it brings up their kills with weapons. Head on over to the op and see how much damage per round they have with it. Yeah, this pretty much confirms I'm a dirty chamber op crutch. So stop being stubborn already and download Valorant Tracker for free using my link in the description and finally gain all the information you've been missing out on. Thank you, Valorant Tracker, for sponsoring today's video. All right, so the next spot on our list is humanity almost wiped out. So this is of course in reference to the Radiant Wars, an alternate reality where for some reason it's still unclear why Radiants rose to power in an attempt to wipe out humans from the Earth they call home. This was led by Reyna, which crowned herself Empress of the army and led the way to destroy all humans. Other Radiants that we're familiar with in our alpha timeline joined the army like Astra, Sky, and Sage, for example, while humans tasked with defending themselves and their world like Brimstone and Sova were fighting as well. Only when KO was created by the few humans left in the Radiant Wars timeline did they even stand a chance. This was shown in great detail in KO's reveal trailer, and at the very end, he managed to kill Empress Reyna, and we're assuming the rest of the Radiants fell as well. Once everything was good in his universe, KO left it and came to ours via teleporter on Breeze to make sure it never happens again, even in another reality. Speaking of KO, let's move on to the next entry on the list, KO's dog tags. So as you can see, KO wears a pair of dog tags around his neck with what looks like a bullet hole carved out on one of them. Well, in the Radiant Wars, KO shared a deep bond with the Brimstone of that timeline. Now, from what KO says, they were pretty much like brothers. Tragically though, Empress Reina killed that Brimstone and KO was left to pick up his body and mourn. Well, it's safe to assume that to carry out the honor of that Brimstone, KO chooses to wear his dog tags. And with the bullet hole carved into them, we're pretty much left to guess where that Brimstone got shot that ultimately killed him in that timeline. The next thing on our list is the Sylvanus Creatures. These scary looking creatures can be seen in the Sylvanus bundle underneath the cabin featured in this skin. Thank you, Seinfeld, for finding this. I would have never saw it, and I hope your career at Riot Games is doing really well. There's still people debating if any of the skins in Valorant can contribute or mean anything to the lore. I would be stoked if some of these skins were canon in the lore of Valorant, but also at the same time, I'm not sure I'd want the Sylvanus bundle to be real because those things are terrifying. Speaking of cosmetics, let's take a look at a very disturbing player card on the next spot on our list, the Rituals. As you can see on the player card here on the Reaver 1.0 bundle, a horrific ritual is taking place with other members of this cult participating in the background. I've talked about a lore theory linking this to Omen in the past, so if you want to see that video, you can click that link on the screen right now after you're done watching this video. But whatever this cult is, it likely has something to do with the darkness behind Reaver. Either what we're seeing here is a sacrifice being made or an initiation being done on a new member of the cult. Either way, I wouldn't want to be there. Next on the list is the disaster of Haven. Not many people pay attention enough to realize that there are massive columns coming out of the ground on the map Haven behind Defender spawn. As we now know, Haven is the site of a kingdom storage facility of Radiant Knight. Well, these massive smoldering columns coming from the ground are likely due to a Radiant Knight related events that caused this to happen. I can't imagine what the civilians of this once great temple were thinking when out of nowhere they were forced to abandon their homes due to this disaster. Another thing I want to talk about on this list is the Experiment X11. Over on Icebox, there's a small screen by the ship on attacker spawn that shows us what Experiment X11 looks like. There seems to be an unfathomably massive tower of presumably Radiant Knight. In the player card version, we see some wires hooked up to this tower of presumably Radiant Knight. Something to note though is that it looks like it's cold where this experiment took place because the kingdom scientists look like they're in cold weather gear and it appears to be chunks of snow and ice at the base of the tower. What are your thoughts on what the kingdom was trying to do here? The next disturbing fact about Valorant on my list is going to be the Everett Lind research facility. This is actually the facility on the map Fracture that we play on. It was a research lab run by Alpha and Omega Kingdoms in a group effort to create the large Radion collider we see underneath the facility in the middle of the map. Things were actually going well with this joint operation between worlds. Things were still tense and they didn't really trust each other by letting very few employees interact with others not from their world, but things were still going well until Chamber and his Omega double teamed up on a secret mission to destroy the LRC the scientists were working on. They both shot their sniper rifles on opposite sides of the collider, creating a chain reaction of destruction. Many scientists and personnel died due to the disaster, and it's still not known why Chamber and his Omega double did what they did. Sometime later, Killjoy visits the Everett Lind research facility and sends a depressing voicemail to Brimstone. I'll show you part of it.
And yet, seeing the husk of the facility? It's the people. All those people. Brim, they weren't even soldiers. They were scientists. They didn't have a chance to... Sorry, I have to go. Call me back, please.
Cypher knows what happened to Omen. This next entry on our list is a malicious one and still gives me the question of why Cypher is doing this to him. As we know, Omen had a faulty experiment or tragedy that happened to him that turned him into the monster he is today after Sage did the best she can to revive him. Omen has amnesia of pretty much his entire past life before he turns into the shadow he is now. He yearns to learn and remember of who he was and what he did before he died. It's practically the main thing he wants to know, and Cypher won't tell him. Omen reached out to Cypher to desperately find out what Omen wants to know, but Cypher won't hand that information over to him until Omen pays up a steep price for it. Like, what? He's a member of your team and is suffering at any given second in his new form. Like, why wouldn't you just do away with the price and help him out because he's your friend? Here's the voice line.
Omen, I have the information you asked for, but my price hasn't been paid yet.
On a lighter note though, I do have a spot on this list that isn't as sad as the previous one, but is a little scary and funny at the same time. Non-rendered Valorant agents. This is a funny thing that happens when picking which agent you want to play when starting a match of Valorant. For a few frames before the game can render all of the agent's cosmetic details, a horrific looking base model can be seen. Some of these are actually terrifying and likely would have haunted me in my dreams if I was still a young kid looking at this. Good thing I'm 25 now and nothing scares me. Apparently for people who don't have like the best PCs and are kind of like slow or bad PCs, they can see these abominations for a couple seconds every match of Valorant instead of only a few frames for me. May God have mercy on your soul. The next entry is Phoenix burns down his school. If you've seen my Phoenix lore video, then you already know about this. One of Phoenix's personal player cards shares a story with us of a time Phoenix burned down the performing arts school he attended before joining the Valorant protocol. It was deemed an accident and likely was due to Phoenix not yet getting a grasp on how to use his powers safely and control them when he was younger. We never got any confirmation if anyone died during this event, but it's still pretty dark. Well, unlike Phoenix burning down his school, this next entry, the Venice Incident 2049, a lot of people died. Lore nerds like me already know pretty much everything there is to know about this incident, so I'll keep it short. Valorant's storyline takes place not far in the future, with the first light happening in the year 2039, with the first major Radiant related disaster occurring 10 years later with the Venice Incident of 2049. Just like how I said in the previous entry of the shooting range floating, so is the map Ascent, which is in Venice, Italy. Now, normally cities just don't float in the air, right? Well, at least I hope they don't. This happened in Venice due to the detonation of the spike in the Duelist cinematic between our Alpha Earth agent Phoenix and Omega Earth's Jett. Jett got the best of Phoenix and planted the spike, leading to its detonation. But this spike isn't a normal bomb. It is actually a teleportation device that teleports Radiant from one location to another dedicated location. That's how Omega Earth steals Radiant from our Earth and why the attackers attempt to plant the spike in Valorant's gameplay. So as an unfortunate side effect of a spike detonation, a large area around the blast looks like it has its reality destabilized and sort of just suspends the matter in the air. The next entry on the list is going to be Breeze's Murals. Now, to be fair, guys, I actually don't even really know what these drawings or murals even mean. It was likely made by the inhabitants of the island that seemed to have abandoned the island once the disaster happened over the mansion off in the distance outside the map. Like I said, though, I'm not too sure what these murals actually mean, but I did come up with a few possible interpretations of them in my Breeze lore video. Check that out if you're interested. Other than that, though, what story do you guys think the creators were trying to tell when painting these? The next entry, AntiKingdom, is yet another piece of evidence you can find scattered across the maps that a lot of the public really does hate the kingdom. These signs can be found on some maps around in Valorant, showing some anti-kingdom propaganda posted around by the public. It's a stark contrast to Omega Earth's Kingdom Industries, where there they are pretty much hailed as heroes and pioneering multi-dimensional exploration. Speaking of Kingdom Industries, here's the next entry on the list, Omega Earth. Now, Omega Earth are the main enemies in Valorant's lore. They're the ones that, to our knowledge, initiated the conflict with stealing our Radiant and leaving devastation in its path. But did you know that Omega Earth has gone through world-altering tragedies as well? Like how massive tidal waves and rising sea levels devastated the surface of the planet, forcing most of the inhabitants into underwater biodomes when the sea levels get too high. We know that sometimes they can open up the dome when the waters recede enough to allow natural air and sunlight to pass through, but whenever another tidal wave comes in or when the sea levels rise again, they're forced to close the Radiant infused dome again. These player cards tell the tale of the original Radiants of the Valorant Legion saving and rescuing civilians from the massive columns of water. Our next entry on the list is Lucia, Reyna's little sister that was presumed dead the vast majority of the time Valorant was released. Until fairly recently, when Fade's dossier she made of Reyna told us that no, Lucia was alive. Later on, this story opened up again when Viper left a voicemail to Brimstone talking about how Reyna needs to go on more missions to collect more souls of her fallen enemies. Viper is splitting these souls in half to try to not only feed Reyna, but keep her little sister Lucia alive as well. She is struggling greatly with this and loses one soul for every one she splits, basically needing a double amount to just barely have enough to keep both sisters alive. It's getting to the point now where Lucia is barely alive and hanging on by a thread. Viper also questions what Reyna will do if Viper fails and is unable to keep her alive.
What's it like, Reyna, fighting to keep a loved one alive? No, please, tell me. Fill your heart, Reyna. If you want results, I need those souls.
Keeping the theme of lost loved ones, Cypher family is dead is our next entry. Yeah, as tragic as this sounds, pretty much all of the family Cypher cares about is dead, including his wife and his kids as well. Well, we don't know how they perished, but we know a woman named Nora was extremely important to him. Nora could have been his wife or perhaps a daughter, but to be fair, as far as I know, we don't have any concrete evidence that Cypher ever had any kids, but when he refers to his family, he says them. Cypher has even gone to question Sage if she can revive anyone without any constraints.
So, Sage, you can bring people back from the dead? Anyone? No constraints? Interesting.
Also, anytime Cypher gets resurrected from Sage during battle, it appears that in that short time of his death, he sees his family again.
For a moment, I saw them.
Our next entry, Omen Hears his enemies, is just yet another example of the constant suffering Omen goes through. There is a voice line where he questions Reyna that with the soul she consumes, does she hear the voices of her enemies like Omen does? As far as I know, Reyna hasn't answered Omen on this question yet, but how sad must it be for Omen? Every enemy he kills, he is constantly hearing their voices. I can only imagine that after only a few kills, his mind would be crowded with the noise of the fallen.
Reyna, the souls you consume, do you hear their voices as I do?
Number 20, the last entry on today's list, Viper enjoys killing. Tops it off with the undeniable fact that Viper not only enjoys killing people, but loves torturing them as she does it. There are countless voice lines of Viper talking about either how long victims have before they start begging for air, or other ways she's tortured in the past. She laughs about it and really does give off the diabolical scientist vibe.
I wonder if these ones will beg. They all do, after a while. Remember, nobody's a hero when they're crying for air.
Let me know what your favorite disturbing or horrifying Valorant fact was by leaving a comment down below. If you enjoyed the video, it would mean so much if you subscribed and left a like to help it out in the algorithm. Make sure to follow me on Twitch and Twitter and hit up the Discord server for lore discussions. Now with all that being said, Jeppy out!